creativity. It's kind of interesting that the universe kind of expresses itself to me and gives me ideas at times, because I'm driving up the hill today and I do a ritual. I don't know, talk about strange. I do a ritual every time I get in my car driving up 41 in Redwood. I do the prayer of protection. But I also do the Lord's Prayers, and I'm introducing to my Catholic background, you know, and so I do the Lord's Prayer. But today I did that, and I'm going up Redwood, and all of a sudden I found myself slowing down. I slowed way down. I thought, what's going on here? It's as if somebody else was driving the car, and I coming down Deadwood really slow, and all of a sudden this doe and two fawns ran in front of me, and I must have missed them by just like inches. Isn't that cool? So when we talk about creativity, my gosh, there's something about us that's in us and with us all the time. We're always creating. So what's kind of strange about today's session is the fact that we're already there. We're talking about creating, we're there already. We're always creating, that's what we do. Even 300 BC, Plato said that there's something strange about us, but when we think a thought and we do it with enough energy, it provides a spiritual prototype that eventually manifests in life. He didn't know why, you know, but he says that's the way it is. So we're continuing trading and creating, and because we're thinking all the time. Our major function as spiritual beings occupying this body is to think thoughts. That's what spirit's all about. It's unformed energy, but its one function is thought. And think about that. And the fact that we think, and a lot of folks say, well, the spiritual masters say, well, we think 16,000 to 16,000 thoughts a day. I don't know if anybody's ever counted them, but we do think a lot of thoughts. So what is today really about? Is it about the idea of the wherefore and how to and how this all works? No, because the idea of all of this is that we are creators, whether we like it or not, whether we accept it or not, or whether we believe in it, no matter what our belief system. I can be an atheist, and I can say, I don't believe that we are creators. It doesn't really matter what we believe in. That's what we do, and that's how we do it. So anyway, today, when we start looking at this idea of creativity, we're not looking at the idea that of the how-to or the wherefores. We're looking at creating, but creating the good. Creating the good. That's what this is about this month. How do we create the good? What do I need to do to put in mind, to change my conscious to where I'm always creating the good? Because we know that this life form, Linda pointed out last week, this life form that we call the spiritual energy, it has its own function. It accepts the thoughts and accepts the energy, and then it manifests. There's a dynamic to the manifest. But the problem with that is, it's good for us, but it also could even be a bad thing. We do a lot of counseling, all of our ministers do, and we have people who are always creating their life experiences, but it's always not very good experiences, because this energy it's my way or the highway, and that's the way spirit works in our life. And so if we want to focus on, because that which we focus on, that which we give our attention to, creates an intention, creates a manifestation. That's the universal law. Whether we like it or not, believe it or not, that's it. And so what this month is all about, I need to contain my emotion here. What this month is all about is not creating necessarily. We're always creating. We're already there. It's how do we create the greater good? And that's what today's all about, and that's what this month's about. So what do I do, Angela? What do you need to do in consciousness to be creating the greater good? Well, one of the things that we need to understand is we need to, in some way, get our consciousness, a little bit of relief, to free. And this is why it's so neat that we're doing this the day after the Declaration of Independence ceremony. It jives, it blends. Because we need to give our conscience the freedom to not be bombarded with, or not to be counting on, and give it some relief from being attached to or being guided by the baggage of a conditioned mind. We need to somehow, and this is number one as far as I'm concerned, we need to somehow relieve that tension, relieve our conscience, and give it the freedom to not be bogged down by the conditioned mind. That sounds like foo-foo stuff, doesn't it? But that's the issue of what we're creating when we're creating not the good, but creating the greater good. We need to somehow not let our conscious mind be bombarded by or held back by a conditioned mind. And that's what when we look at the conditioning, we know that the negative stuff that comes through. The other thing is, we need to give ourselves the freedom of not being under the domain of the physical, of the activities, of the stuff, of the circumstances and things that happen on a daily basis. It takes control over our emotions. It takes control of our thoughts. But we need to somehow figure a way to where we're not under the domain and the province of what's happening in the physical world. Now, I thought about this very strongly, and this sounds like out-of-the-box thinking. But Angela, we celebrated Independence Day yesterday. We need to celebrate too our freedom from the dynamics and the power that the physical world has over us, over our thoughts, and over our emotions. We need to free ourselves of that. How do we do that? Well, why do we need to do it? We need to do it because Angela's Angela's mind needs to be able to function without being held back by these negative thinking, held back by those issues and I would say limitations and false perceptions. That really, what they do, it short circuits our connection to Spirit itself. When we live in that area of not freedom, but where we're attached to something that's going on in the physical world, what we're doing, we're short-changing the energy of our mind itself, and we're cutting off the connection that we have to Spirit itself. Do you agree with that? Mm-hmm. And so that's what today's about. It's kind of interesting that what this month is all about, actually, it's about changing our perspective, changing our identification from the third dimension of the power of the physical world to the spiritual, to the idea of spirit, and to the truth that we are spiritual beings. So today what we're talking about is we're beings of light, and that's who we are. I don't know how many of you know Bruce Lipton. Anybody read The Biology of Belief? It's kind of interesting. And he deals with this issue of where, if we really want to create the good, we need to somehow look at what our attachment is. We need to kind of free ourselves from the physical in some way. And what he says is in his book, Biology of Belief, which is pretty awesome, he says that these bodies of ours, he compares it to earth suits. How many remember reading that? That this is actually an earth suit. And he says it's a vessel that we use that's fully equipped for us to manipulate and to work through the physical drama, to take us places, etc. That this is actually an earth suit. And that who we are at the core of our being, we're spiritual beings. It's not really connected to that in any way, shape, form. I'm not sure if I totally agree with that, but that we're spiritual beings, that's not totally part of that. However, we're spiritual beings that's using this earth suit to get around, to have fun, to create things. But at the core of our being, we're a being of light. And that being a being of light means that we are creative energy. That we're creative energy. We have another student at Laura, did a professional paper, Laura McGee, and she wrote a paper on vacation is a spiritual practice. It's kind of interesting. And what she did, he mentioned earth suits. She compared this whole thing as a car. She said, I'm not a car. I'm not the car. But I use the car. I'm in the car and it takes me where I want to go. It helps me to visit places and to go to work and do all those good things. But when I leave the car, I take my consciousness with me, so I'm not the car. What am I then? I'm a life force. I'm a spiritual entity. I am a being of light. So when we start looking at this whole idea, how are we going to create the greater good? We need to transcend our activities, our thoughts, our awareness from the physical to the spiritual. I don't know if we all agree with that, but that's the way it is. It's kind of interesting that what happens on this is that the Bible really tells us and springs forth on exactly what they mean by this. And the Bible says this, do not be conformed to the world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Do we know what that means? What does it mean to be to not be conformed to the world? Anybody know what that means? Leo knows. Thank you, Leo. What does it mean? It's exactly what we're talking about. If we're going to create the greater good, we need to somehow transcend the physical. Release it in our life, not let it control us or dictate what we're thinking about, but allow us to stay connected to source energy, to spirit itself. So when are we conformed to the world? We're conformed to the world when we're in harmony. There's that word harmony. We use it to be in harmony with spirit. But we also can be in harmony with not so good things. When we're in harmony with the false perceptions that's going on. When we're in harmony with the attitudes and the thoughts that because of what that person believes or who he believes or what he believes in or where he goes to church, we're in line with that false perception that those people are not so great. A false perception is when what's kind of interesting, spiritual teachers call these false perceptions, this idea, they call it the human race consciousness. Human race consciousness. We're conforming to the world. When we think that as a person gets older, that person has to be sick to make his transformation. That's ridiculous. But we have a consciousness somehow that says that as we age, therefore, that means we're going to have lumbago or arthritis, or that means we're going to get these horrible disease. To make our transformation, then it necessitates that we are sick and we sick our way out of the universe. That's a core belief. That's a conform. It's conform on a universal scale to the world itself. But be thee transformed by the renewing of your mind. That's what this month is all about. That we need to stop focusing so heavily on the physical. We need to stop allowing the physical to take command over how we think and how we feel. And we need to go way beyond that. What's kind of interesting is there's so much going on here that when we are connected, when we allow that love energy to come forward, it's all automatic. When we're in that fourth dimension frame of existence, beautiful things happen. There's a story that kind of talks about that. Here's this guy named Spencer. And this is a true story about a guy. And he was fighting in the Second World War. And it brought to mind today because this last few months, many of our Second World War veterans are making their transition. But this story is about Spencer. And Spencer is a born-again Christian type person. Spencer believed that there was this dynamic, universal energy that surrounded him and that he could relate to it. He called it God. And that it would protect and be his partner throughout his life. So anyway, he was given an order to take his company to take a higher ground during the Second World War, a higher ground, which would give him priority over the whole area. But the problem with this is he noticed, he said, my troopers have to cross this open field, and it's going to be disastrous for them. We're going to lose some lives here. And so that's not going to happen. He says, I'm going to go to source energy. I'm going to God. So he gets on his knees in front of his troopers, and he prays. He says, protect us, bring us the protection and the guidance so that we can take this hill so that we'll be in command of this whole area. And he got up with tremendous faith, knowing that it was going to be possible, and he leads his troops, and he starts heading over this open field. And what happens is, mysteriously, a cloud, a huge white cloud, came over their eyes and just miraculously came into the field. True story. Came into the field, and it was a heavy mist. And it covered that whole area in a dense fog. And so he was able to walk through the field and got up on the hill. And then the fog disappeared. Now, what's that all about, you know? And that's documented as truth. And the other thing, that wasn't the end of the story, though. A few days, maybe a month later, during mail call, he gets a letter from his mother. And his mother said, you know Mrs. Flannery. And something strange happened. She called me and she said she woke up a few days ago. In the middle of the night, she woke up and she had that thought,